Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today's guest is Bruce Nelson, a filmmaker, somebody who is helping us with our SkyFire Film Festival, Environmental Film Festival, coming up here in March. And welcome to the show, Bruce.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about the festival and all the wonderful films that we're going to be showing.
Great. You're an accomplished film guy, and you run, I think, the Mesa Film Festival already. So this is you're one of the this is your space, right? I'm a soil guy.
It's Indian runs a film festival. I'm part of the team. It's not my festival,
Okay.
but he runs it, and I help out. I've been helping him ever since he started it. When he originally started, it was downtown Mesa, coffee shops. Just wherever we could show films. So yeah, I'm part of that team as well.
Cool. Now, okay, how'd you get into this? I mean, give me your background. Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? What motivated you? You know, what keeps you inspired? Wakes you up in the morning? Keeps you interested?
So I'm from Mesa. I grew up here in Mesa, Arizona, and
Uh,
in school, I was an athlete and doing the plays and that kind of stuff. So I knew I wanted to be an actor. And so I got an opportunity to do some work here at the Phoenix Theater back in the day. And then I got an opportunity to travel with a singing group, and we toured Canada and we toured Europe. And I fell in love with Toronto. And I thought, this city could do well. I could do well at this city. And I studied at Phoenix Center for the Arts. I had taken a 2-year program that I studied there. So packed up everything I had and to Toronto. And I had been there in the late summer, so the weather was beautiful. So I didn't think about the winter. So when I moved there, it was December, and man, I was like, "What in the world?" That was a bad choice.
how
I
long
was
did you stay? How
freezing. I
long
thought
did
my
you
face was
stay?
going to fall off. I was there for 5 years,
Wow.
and
Now,
I was very
I
fortunate.
grew up. Where you thought that was bad. I grew up on the other side of the border there in Buffalo. So Toronto was my backyard. We used to, and I love Toronto. It's a very sophisticated city. You know, I felt like Canadians were one with us. I mean, we're the same people, and they had. So we would go over and see baseball games and concerts and party on Yonge Street and that whole thing. But I love Toronto, so I understand how you fall in love with it. But you got a taste of the weather from back there. Uh, you got the easy taste. You go over to Buffalo. It's that. I don't know how it is now, though. With climate change, it could be the Miami of the North. Who knows? But all right. So you were in Toronto. You came back. Um, Good judgment would take you away from where you have to shovel and see dark skies quite a bit. So you came back here, and then you got back into doing what you do, making movies and
Yeah, I
stuff.
came back. I knew people here, so I came back, and I was an actor for 5 years there. I never had a day job when I lived in Toronto. Never. I was
Wow.
fortunate, so I came back. I hit the ground running. Got into some theater work here. Started teaching a little bit, and sort of connected with the theater community, and started doing a lot of theater. Then I packed up, moved to Hollywood, like so many actors do, and worked a lot of regional theater. Did some films, and so then it was coming home and back and forth between LA and Mesa, and the light rail came through, and my city was changing, and I thought I should do something so people remember my city, because I've been on a lot of film sets. I've probably been in about 15 or 20 films, so I was familiar with it. And I always liked documentaries, so I thought I'll make a documentary about my city. So I
Wow.
wrote a grant, got a small grant, and I said, okay, let's see what we can do. Went on YouTube, watched a bunch of YouTubes, read some books about it, and had this big vision of what I thought the documentary would be. Of course, that changed about the first the first day we were in it.
Yeah, isn't that strange when you're in that creative process? You got this. This is what I'm going to do, and when you're done, it doesn't even resemble what you thought it was going to be. But that's okay. That's the direction it was meant to go, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was good. We ended up having enough money to shoot for just one day, and I had this whole thing laid out what we were going to do that day, and that didn't work. But we shifted, and it worked really, really well. And I was happy. I thought if I can get 15 minutes, I'll be glad. The documentary is called Northtown. It's on Amazon Prime. You can watch it there. It's 65 minutes.
Is it going to be in the film festival? Is that one of them? Has it been selected yet? Do you know?
This one, no, we have another one we're working on that we probably will submit.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because some of the films, if they're not quite ready, I think we're going to be running trailers too to talk about upcoming films. So that's kind of cool. It's interesting how people's lives parallel a little. My sister went to Northwestern way back in the day and started in speech pathology, but she always had the bug to act. So she acted in high school, and then she was kind of that Second City group back then and did a lot of off-Broadway stuff and ended up getting married and living in a rural place in Maine, but she still teaches acting and puts on a play or two. But it's a bug, isn't it? It's especially theater.
Yeah.
When I talk to an actor and they say, "Yeah, I do theater," then I know, okay, you're an actor. It's kind of different from just being a pretty face doing a commercial or, maybe a movie here and there. It's really you're acting for the love of acting, right? Because at theater, you'll reach several people at a time, whatever the size of the theater is, 100 people, 1,000 people. But, movies, millions of people are watching. So it's a very different game. But I think when I see movies, the really good actors in the movies were real actors also doing theater. Is that kind of your take on? That's me just being judgmental from the outside, but is that what you think as well?
Well, you start there. You learn your craft on stage. The great thing about the theater is like your live performance. We're doing the show 2 hours straight. There's no cut, back to one, back to two. You're in it, and you got to figure it out and make it work. And you got to
Yeah.
do it 8 times a week. And so it's a great training ground for then. Once you learn your craft, you can do it in any format that you want. And so I always say, learn your craft. I studied Chekhov. I studied Shakespeare. I studied Stanislavski, the system, what they refer to as the method. I
Oh
studied all
yeah.
those things. So yeah, I did a lot of training. I'm a Second City alumni from Second City, Toronto.
Okay. Wow. That's so. Tell me about some of the stuff you've been in. Tell me. You just said you did a little Shakespeare. You did. Um, have you been in one of those traveling troops where you're going around? You said you did that up in Canada, or
Yeah, I was in Toronto, and there was a couple shows that came through town, touring shows and off Broadway shows, and so I auditioned for those and got to tour with that. Second City Toronto, I was the first touring company they had, and we did main stage in Toronto, and then we did the national tour, and we went out west and we worked our way across to the east. And just for a note, Mike Myers was in my cast when I was at Second City.
oh wow, wow. So let me ask about this. Did you do some comedy and or do you sing or sing and dance? Because I think some of
Yeah, I
the
was a song and dance man. Yeah, when I started training, it's like learn to do everything and then see what falls out. So then doing comedy, sketch comedy. Sketch comedy is a very different animal, very different animal than
oh yeah,
doing, yeah,
you're
than doing what they
very
call legit
adaptive,
theater.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I had a
I
great time. I mean, I remember we toured. We went to Calgary, Edmonton, the mid part of Canada. And we went out to Quebec, Quebec City. We did like a 10 city tour, and it was a great show. I had such a blast working with the sketch comedy. I remember John Candy and Gene Levy and Martin
oh
Short. They
yeah.
came to see our show, and SCTV was on back in the day.
Yeah,
and we were
yeah.
talking about making some things that happen there. So those are, theater was a thing, and then some films. Uh, Probably one of the films you would know. I did a film with Charlie Sheen called No Code of Conduct. It was shot here in Arizona. I was living in
Okay.
LA, but they brought me here, and it's an action film, and that was a blast. Playing a bad guy. That was really fun. Another film, Take Me Home Tonight, is out everywhere. It's been on TV a lot lately. Then local here, Looking for Buchanan. There was a film shot locally by some filmmakers. Did that. Another film I did called Blind Eye, which was shot here locally. I was in LA. They brought me out. About 15 films, about probably over 100 different plays that I've done. And then, so I'm just always looking for something new to do.
Something unique, and you basically get into the character, whoever that character is that you're playing. Um, I I don't think I could ever do that. For one thing, my memory, I don't think I could remember my lines without screwing them up. The other thing is I think I'd be completely terrified to do that. But again, it's kind of a passion and a something. I think it's almost like an infection, from my sister watching, and and so that's that. I think it does take special people to do, what you do. Uh, I just was, as you started talking about, and I would. I wasn't directly involved, but I met like her friends in her wedding. She was in New York, and um, at her wedding, she did it on Halloween, so everyone had to dress for her wedding, and which was wild. And of course, you ask actors and directors and writers to dress and play parts at a even at a party wedding, and it's over the top. And so we she had a lot of I had a lot of fun with that and watching the people she was working with. But okay, so now I'll shift. I was going back to memory lane there, but what you're right now you're starting to do documentaries. So your work, you've done everything. It sounds like everything: song, dance, play, movie, probably commercials. Have you done much in the way of TV, like even small parts in any kind of series or anything
Not a
like that?
lot of TV, mostly film. Film has been where my kind of landed. Just really doing film and doing theater, but never really booked any kind of TV shows. Most of the film acting is where I kind of wanted to stay. So I always advise my agent that's the lane that I want to be in, kind of thing. And so that's where I've gravitated. I've done some auditions for some of those shows, but I didn't really. That wasn't my passion. I really like film. Film is a different animal than TV. They're very different.
Right, right. Now, how many years ago did you start the concept of the documentary? I mean, it's been the last couple of years. So that's
It was right after the light rails was built, and then
it's
because
quite a
I
while
grew
ago.
up in the yeah, so I grew up 2010 is when I made my first documentary, and so I wanted people to remember the community I grew up in. It was a segregated community, so and after that, I got the bug. I was like, let me do documentaries. So I made 6 documentaries. We're in post production on 3. We've got one called Red Line Veterans. It's about the veterans from the one segregated community. We're in post production on that. I have another one called See Jane Run, which we were in Jakarta for about 10, 15 days shooting that, and we're in post on that. And also locally here, you probably know of the Nile Theater. We're in post production on a
Yeah.
documentary called the Nile Theater here in Mesa, Arizona.
So you went from being in front of the camera to being behind the camera. And so as part of the documentary, do you have writers? Do you have a whole team, or are you come up with the concept and the theme? How much, there's so much in the business. You got to get financing. You've got to get people who know how to operate camera and lighting and makeup and period clothing at times. I mean, there's so many different details. But as an actor, you were probably um, doing your thing and the whole time wondering, oh, why does the director do that? Or why didn't they write this? I mean, I can imagine if I was an actor, I'd be like, kind of, I could do it better or whatever. So at some point you decided, you know what, maybe I can do it a little better. And and or at least have a focus or a message, right?
Yeah, with documentaries, I wanted to tell stories that I wanted to tell, and so that's what I can be independent documentary. And yeah, I have camera crew that I work with. I have sound designers, I have editors that I work with all the time. They're like on my steady. These are my go to people. And so yeah, as an independent filmmaker, you got to find the financing, you got to find the story. Very often, I will end up doing a lot of the voiceover when I can't find somebody that's got the right texture that I want. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a lot of research and figuring out what is going to happen, where you're going to go, who you're going to talk to, what the story is. There's a lot in development, just trying to figure that out. Research and development. What is the story I'm telling about this person or this thing or this object or this city? And that takes a lot of time, but it's worth it in the end.
And you, throughout your career, you met a lot of talented people. So you could either emulate them or maybe even ask them to help with some of your projects.
Absolutely, I seek out, just locally here, my editor, Ita, who's my wonderful editor. He and I talk a lot before he starts cutting things up and works really, really well. Kelly is a great resource. I just met her. Kelly is an Emmy Award documentary filmmaker, and she's got great
Right.
advice on how to make things work. So there's a lot of people out there that you can go to, and I belong to some of those filmmaker groups, which is great. I usually often do those challenges where you make a film in 72 hours, which is great
Oh,
because you get to meet some people and you get to really see what they're made of because it's so stressful and you get to see how people deal with stress because you got 72 hours, you got to have that film done. And it brings out the best in people and the worst in people. And then I can know, okay, I can work with that person. So,
that's like doing, what, about 6 marathons in a row, or it's more than
yeah.
that. It's like 6 marathons per day for 3 days. So that's an interesting project. So let me get back here and focus then on this new part of your career. Of course, if somebody called you and had a major role for you in a theater production or a movie, you'd probably be pulled back into that for a period of time, I'd imagine. Well, why not? But your focus over these last 10, 15 years has been that creative process and and making these documentaries. And I look at I love documentaries if they're done right, and they all still have to tell a story. But if they talk about something that I'm just not aware, they're an education piece, right? So um, I remember when I started reading books, it was not in grade school, high school, or college because I had to read books then. But after I got out, I started reading novels, and I loved novels. But what I ended up doing is transitioning into more and more nonfiction because I wanted to know about things, right? So now I, for every 25 books that I read, I'll read one novel, and I call it kindling, just something for fun that I do, right? So I look at documentaries kind of the same way, and I can watch, TV programs or sitcoms, or I can watch even movies, but the idea of watching a documentary kind of enriches you. And if the documentary is um, done correctly, it's also entertaining, right? And I think sometimes the documentaries are a little too scholastic or too preachy. So, how about what's the flavor? Have you changed the flavor of yours to have some of them have a sense of humor, or um, tell me how you approach your filmmaking?
For like, I think of the Nile Theater, that documentary we were in post production. I was fascinated with it. The building is over 100 years old and it originally opened 1924, I think it was. And it opened originally, it was called the Nile Theater, and it was a whites only theater. And I thought, well, why would you embrace this African culture and not let any black people into the theater? That just seemed kind of odd to me. And so I thought, let's just figure this out. And I got a small grant, and we started doing research on it. And it was just so fascinating, entertaining. They showed Charlie Chaplin films there. It was one of the first places they showed talkie films back in the day. And
Oh,
that just really got to me. So that film was not only educational, but it's entertaining. And some great stories came out of there. One of the stories we tell about it is the owner, William Menhennet, was over in Hollywood buying some films. And he was on a film set and he was out to lunch after that, talking to a couple of people, and got the films and left. And when he got back in town, a buddy of his said, "Well, how did you enjoy, going?" He said, "I had a great time." This is like 1928, 1929. And he says, "Well, how did you enjoy meeting Charlie Chaplin?" And he goes, "I didn't meet Charlie Chaplin." He goes, "Yeah, you did. You had lunch with him, but he wasn't in makeup and costume, so he didn't know who he was." And I just thought, that's so fascinating. You're
Wow.
right. You're showing these guys films. You don't even know who he is when you meet him.
I've you've sparked my curiosity. At what year did it become open to all people instead of just whites
It was
only?
probably 1938, 35, right around there.
Okay,
Then it became uh, open, but it still was segregated within
segregated.
that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it was open, and we interviewed two people that had gone there as kids, a old white woman and an old black man, and it was just wonderful to hear their stories. The white witch was so sweet. She came into the theater. She hadn't been there in probably 50 years, and it's changed. And she looked around and she goes, "What happened to the masks?" She said, "They had these beautiful masks when I was here," and you could just see her reliving that time. And
Wow.
she goes, "We used to come here and watch movies, and it was a great time." She says, "I never thought about it, but the colored people used to sit over there. We sat over here. We thought that's just where they wanted to sit. We never thought that they couldn't come where we were." And she says, "I just didn't understand that." And so it was wonderful to hear her perspective. And then we're told the old black man, very different perspective about it. And that was just a charming story. I've got a trailer for that came out well. And so we're in post production on that. I just need to finish the work, and we're going to get it out into the world.
Well, that might be a trailer that we show at the film festival, just of what's coming
Absolutely.
up. And
It's ready.
it, some of the books that I've read, because I'm a kind of more agricultural based or soil based, but I read all of Kurlinski's books, and he
Mm.
will pick a commodity, and he tells the history of the world through the commodity, whether it's salt or cod or paper or milk and things. And I tell people, oh, I read a book on milk. They're like, what? It's you can read a label on a milk bottle. What do you need to? But it is interesting because you see, 1924. That's a different world. That was 101 years ago, right? That's a different world than now. And throughout, you've got the history of the United States, you got the history of the world, you got the history of Phoenix, and all the things, the good, the bad, the ugly, that took place during that time period. And you've got this physical building that somehow managed not to get blown up or burned down, and then
Yeah.
all the stories from everyone who was involved, you know. So what seems like if you told me, oh, I'm doing a documentary on a theater in downtown Phoenix, I'd be like, oh, okay, But then when you look at it from that light, it's like, wow, this thing could be, super rich in what it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a little bit of your bio here, and then you can elaborate on it. But you're the founder of NEB Productions, and your mission and goal is preserving African American and community history through your films and your exhibits, and specifically, I think Arizona and because that's where you grew up and that's where the most, right? And so, the I think so. Tell me, that was you started this and you came up with that idea just because it's something that throughout your life was something important to you, and that's how you got that inspiration.
Yeah, I think you should just know your history, and it helps you understand what's going on today and what people are thinking about in the future. Just by the way, 26 will be America's 250th anniversary, and it will also be the 100th anniversary of the beginning of Black History Month.
Wow. Black History Month started 100 years ago.
Yes.
No kidding. Well, you started. Tell me about the beginning of that. Who started that? I mean, and where was it
There
started?
was a professor that started it. His name is lacking me right now, but he started it. He just thought people should know about that kind of thing. Simply should know it, and it's like because history is history, you know, everybody. And so I'm going to be doing different things throughout it. And I just find topics that I like. You know, I had some folks come to me from the Mesa Hohokams, and I did a documentary about them. I didn't really the spring training. It came out of Mesa, Arizona. The Cubs were one of the first teams that showed up here.
Right. And the
And
Cubs
so they have a
facility is there
documentary I
now.
put together for them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. The start of something like Black History Month, that's an entire documentary right there, I'm sure, in the making, right? And it's interesting that's from emancipation to 1926 was not a long period of time. I mean, you're looking at, what, 50 years, give or take, so the end of the Civil War until that time. And that also, Black History Month, the concept was another 30, 40 years before civil rights movements started with Martin Luther. And so that, where it sits right in the middle of that is very surprising to me. But again, I guess history is somewhat, they say history is written by the victors, and
Yes.
a lot of history is swept under, but it doesn't ever get swept under, does it? It's like
Right.
it's like
Yeah, and it was
seed.
Carter G. Woodson was the one that started. He had an idea to start it, and so
Yeah,
it's important that you just share that. You see some commonalities and stories among everybody when you look at that history.
yeah.
People have some of the same goals. That say, hey, we're really not that different after all.
And bringing something to light that's been buried
Yeah.
for a fair amount of that 100 years is an amazing thing. I mean, that's a gift or a contribution that you can make with your movies. There's three big ones I think that are coming out. Northtown, or maybe they came out, or maybe these are the ones that were popular, but Northtown, Red Line, Veterans of Washington. Those were ones you already have, and what are those about? What were those about?
Northtown is on Amazon, and that's about the segregated community in Mesa. It's available on Amazon
Okay.
Prime. You can go see it there. Red Lines, we're in post production. We're looking at that. We're telling some more stories. We're getting close. We have our first what they call assembly. That's when you just take everything and put it together with a doc and see what you have, and then go, okay, where are the holes? We need to change some things. So that one we're getting where we just did a preview scening from recently, just showing it to raise some more money. And then the third one that I'm doing is called Looking for Laura Nelson. And that's about I discovered through DNA testing, I'm connected to a woman who was lynched in 1911 in Okima, Oklahoma. And her name was Laura Nelson. And I had seen her photograph from years, but they never said her name. And I just stumbled on it by accident. And that is
Yeah.
my grand aunt.
Interesting. Yeah, one of my favorite PBS shows is Finding Your Roots, and they focus on a lot of Jewish heritage and history and Black history because there was a section, that there's pieces of our history that were completely disrupted when people were separated from families and separated from their homelands and put into a new place. So literally starting traditions and life of their own here, and the idea of being able to connect back to, places of origin, I think is a really important thing. That's kind of a cool thing. So when yours is Red Lines of Washington, is that Washington State, Washington, D.C., or is that a different Washington?
It's Red Lines of Washington Escobedo. It's a neighborhood in Mesa.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And I focused on that. It's like a 1 square mile radius. And there are dozens and dozens of great stories that came out of there. And people just don't know. Manuel Mendoza's story I love. He got the Medal of Valor, unfortunately, after he passed away. His story, we've been showing a scene from his. He fought off over 100 Nazi Germans, 100 to 200 by himself in Italy with handguns, hand grenades, machine guns, bazookas, and a flamethrower. And
Wow.
we just learned about his story in the last, I would say, 8 or 9 years. He passed away, unfortunately. before they can recognize him. But that's one of the stories we're telling,
Yeah,
and we just don't forget about it.
there's an amazing richness that, like I said, it kind of gets buried.
Yeah,
But you have that ability with documentaries to unbury it and to show that this, certainly blacks have been probably the creators, a big part of the creation of the United States in our fabric. But it's not something that's necessarily known or told, and you have the ability to do that now. So basically, you have something now. You've used your whole career and talents to get to the point where you can now do something that I imagine is pretty fulfilling, right? It's
yeah,
that's what gets you going. And now
yeah. Share some stories.
we're lucky enough to have you as one of the people that put on this whole film festival. Because Joe and I, we're pretty clueless with all of that, We're and it's just amazing to us how many people are coming together, because it's really not our film festival. It's everyone else's that I think felt a need, and we think even this year will be in the top 10 film festival of environmental film festivals worldwide. So that's been our mission, is we try to build capacity with community and capacity for people to understand what's happening to the environment, or at least what man's doing to the environment, and maybe some solutions along the way. So I'll definitely look forward to seeing and talking to you more, and I'm sure we'll have at least one or two of your films that will be in the film festival, and we'll probably be doing more podcasts as well as we progress. But thank you so much for being on the show today. And Bruce Nelson, hey, how do you mentioned a bunch of films that people can find that you've already done, and you've talked about some films that are coming up, but how does someone find you? Do you have a website or a
I've got a website, nebproductions.com, and all my films are there. And usually I go directly to my audience. I don't do a lot of streaming. I go directly, but we do have Northtown on Amazon Prime. You can go and watch it there. And so, yeah, anytime. And I'm glad to be part of the film festival. Tell people, come out March 26, 27, 28. Come out, see some great films. I've been watching the films on Film Freeway. We got some wonderful films. People come out and enjoy. We're going to have a great time.
And these film festivals, I've gone to Sundance, and I think I went to Cannes, but and then there was one in San Sebastian, but they are so much fun. I think this, and I think you agree, this can be one of the premier events in the state of Arizona. And I think for people who doesn't like to watch movies, it's also great for education. So a lot of the tickets are being paid for and donated by corporations and then given to students. So, and the students from all over, Arizona can come and look. And we've got, Joe and I do a lot of podcasting internationally. UFE's got work in Africa, or in Zimbabwe and Malawi, and we've been down to, we were just in Mongolia and Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and we've done podcasts down in the Galapagos and Argentina and over in Europe. So we've got a fairly international base, even for Harvesting Wisdom. But we're going to have a large number of international submissions, and then we're involved now with the Native American or the indigenous people here in the U.S. and many different tribes, and there's a lot of really good quality documentaries there too. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And the crazy thing at a film festival is you just can't see all the films. You can't be everywhere at once and see everything. But you can try, and you can see the ones certainly that are interesting to you. And anyway, I appreciate you being here today, and I look forward to maybe seeing you at the after-hour parties too after the films are over. because that's part of the
Yeah,
fun
I'm
too.
organizing those now. I've got two set up, and we're going to do a coffee with the filmmakers at Organic
Yeah.
Bean on a Saturday morning. So come talk to filmmakers. I've got all that planned out. You
Some of
can
that
walk
stuff,
from the mix center. It'd be
some
great.
of that stuff is exclusive too. We'll have some interesting people there, and it'll be a lot of fun. And some of it will be private, invite only, and some will be accessible if they buy a big enough ticket package, I guess. But it's gonna be a lot of fun, and we get to showcase Tempe, Mesa, Phoenix to start, and then we expect in subsequent years to service all of Arizona, Tucson, up in Flagstaff and Pine Top, and the West Side and everything else. So I just think it's another gift that we can give back to our community here. So, but Bruce, thanks for being here. I'm getting the hook. You know that, like in the old vaudeville, you're gonna see something pulling on my neck. So I appreciate it, and we'll definitely be in touch, and we'll be seeing you more and more as we get closer to showtime.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of the team.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.